40. Dear colleagues, my name is Zlatko Kregar. I work in DG Move Sustainable Intelligent Transport Unit. I'm very pleased to welcome you today on our webinar led by the consortium of our EAFO portal, European Alternative Fuels Observatory, of course, where we are going to see the latest data for the full year of 2025 and some new trends in alternative fuels in Europe in 2026 as well. I'm happy to say that this is an important year for alternative fuels. We just had in December, the Commission adopted an automotive package where it has reaffirmed the direction of travel in road transport with some flexibilities newer added, has presented a proposal on clean corporate fleets as well. And this year, as we continue, the Commission is still working on various legislative proposals, among others, the revision of the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation that is in our unit, actually, and colleagues are working on it. And of course, the CO2 standards for heavy-duty vehicles. Today, we are going to hear the trajectory and the situation for road transport, but we will also road transport vehicles. We will also hear about the development of infrastructure that, of course, needs to go hand in hand. We'll talk about charging infrastructure for road vehicles, but we will also talk about onshore power supply. So we will be covering the full length of various modes and their latest developments. So without further ado, I will give the floor to my colleague Harm from FIR to continue to introduce you and tell you the objectives of the webinar today.
Thank you, Zlatko. I'm Harm Wekken. I'm managing partner of FIR Sustainable Mobility, and we are leading the consortium for the management, development, and management of the European Alternative Fuels Observatory. Let me first start with thanking the European Commission, DG Move, that makes the observatory possible. And Zlatko, in your position as representing your colleagues also on this, we think that DG Move really took a very good initiative many years ago to start EAFO. We are involved in it since 2017. And what we can see compared to the early days is that many policy makers are using it. So when we are speaking to cities, when we are speaking to countries, when we are on a conference, we don't have to introduce the observatory anymore. Everybody knows it. And I remember that the first words were, let's make it a reference point for alternative fuels. Luckily, alternative fuels is much more now focused on zero emission. That is close to our heart as a company. Of course, there's also the broader scope of alternative fuels, but more and more we see the uptake of electric and hydrogen and other zero emission alternatives. Zlatko already introduced a little bit the program. Let me first quickly introduce the partners who are working on EAFO. So today, who's not here today are Polis and Netcompany and VUB. They are here, but they're not in the presentation. And you will hear today E-Mobility Europe, so the Association for Electric Mobility and Electric Transport in Europe. Danielle is there, and she will, in the end, also guide us through the Q&A. Eco Movement, who will present, and EOPSA, who will present, and my colleagues from FIR will present. Just quickly through the agenda, we will start with my colleague Mate Sukas, who will explain the developments in in alternative fuels, but mainly in this case on electric mobility and transport uptake. He will also explain more about how to use EAFO and what it is. Then George Martens, Eco Movement, will give an update on the state of play, on the current situation on the infrastructure market, and what EAFO has to offer in this to follow it. And then Roland Teixeira will explain about the early stage market, but very important, so the onshore power supply, which enables port areas to become much more sustainable. And then we have a Q&A in the end. I would like to ask you to all put your questions in the Q&A, so not in the chat. I think it's also not possible to put questions in the chat, but if it's possible, please use the Q&A. We will cluster them. We are a lot of people, so now already over 100. So we hope you have a lot of questions, remarks, suggestions. So just feel free. And please do that during already the session. So we will collect them, and we will go in detail, and we bring them into the discussion and the panel discussion at the end of the meeting. Okay, so Mate is first to kick off now with presentation. Please all watch the time carefully, because we want to finish in time, so that after this lunch meeting you can all go back to work in time. Mate.
Yes, thank you, Harm. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to continue with our session on the first topic about the vehicle market in road transport. So I would like to give you a brief overview about the trends and situation in 25, and also the early market signals that we see in 26, with a very brief outlook for the global situation. So starting with the European alternative fuel or fuel landscape in general, what we can see is there is a significant transition going on in the European Union at the moment. We see that petrol and diesel powertrains are declining since 2020. And we also see the alternative powertrains are getting more and more dominant. So the battery electric vehicle powertrain in the passenger car category reached 17% market share in the year 25. And we also see that the most dominant type of powertrain is the hybrid electric vehicles at the moment, which tripled in volume since 2020. So this transition is quite significant in the last 5 years. From petrol and diesel represented 75% in 2020 of all new car sales. And we see there is sort of a new reality with 2025, where they only represent 36% of sales. So they halved during this transition period in the last 6 years. And on the other hand, we also see that zero emission fuels becoming more and more dominant in the market. Looking at the first vehicle category, so looking at passenger cars, what we see in the last years, and especially in 25, almost 1.9 million battery electric passenger cars were registered in the European Union, and they reached market share of 17.4% in 25. Parallel to that, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles also reached 1 million unit sales in 25, with a market share of 9.4%. Looking at the early signals in 26, we already see quite high numbers in the sales volumes, and especially looking at the market share, we already see higher market share for battery electric vehicles, but also plug-in hybrid vehicles. So battery electric, 19.6% in the first 2 months of 26. In terms of the different countries, we see 5 countries in the European Union are already above 30% of BEV market share. That is a very significant achievement already. And we also see that 12 countries are above 10% BEV market share in Europe, considering new sales of light-duty vehicles in 25. So this also includes the vans, not just the passenger cars. As an example, we see Denmark is a leader in the European Union in terms of BEV market share, well above 60%. And we can also see different trends across member states that plug-in hybrids have different roles in the transition. So as you see in Denmark, plug-in hybrids have a very minor market share, while in other countries like Sweden, it's close to the BEV market share. In terms of the fleets, which is also very interesting and important aspect of the transition, 7.7 million BEV cars we count in 25 in the European Union, and this means around 3.14% of the overall car fleet in 27. For the plug-in hybrids, this is around 5 million vehicles and around 2%. So that the overall plug-in electric vehicle share is in 25 reached 5% in the European Union. In terms of the country overview, what we observe is that there are also countries with a significant share of their fleet already being battery electric or plug-in hybrid. So 11 countries are above 5% plug-in electric vehicle fleet, and 5 countries are above 10% already. So we still see uneven distribution of the transition, but there are already countries with quite high share of their fleet being plug-in electric vehicles. Going into the other light commercial vehicles, so the vans, what we saw in 25, there were 134,000 battery electric vans registered, and we also see that in terms of the alternative fuel powertrains, the battery electric is the most dominant in the van vehicle category, but there were also around 20,000 plug-in hybrid vans registered in 25. In terms of market share, we counted 9.3% market share for battery electric, and we already see in 26 a minor growth to 10% in the first 2 months. In terms of the fleet for the vans, we see plug-in electric vehicles also have significant traction. So more than 500,000 battery electric vans are on the roads of the European member states. However, this in terms of share of the fleet is at the moment is still marginal, being 1.8% at end of 25. In terms of different models and the different products in Europe, we see interesting trends. In the first months of 26, we see Tesla Model Y being the most popular battery electric vehicle in Europe, but also other models are also catching up, and we see overall diverse market, especially from the Volkswagen Group. We see quite a lot of dominant models in the top 10 BEV model sales chart. In terms of the monthly registrations, in January and February 26, we already see growing year-on-year volumes for battery electric vehicles. And in general, this couple of first months are not the highest volumes in the year. So as you can see on the right, the last years, especially December, was the top sales for battery electric vehicles, but also plug-in hybrid vehicles in Europe, which also usually connected to different changes in legislations in the member states. In terms of other powertrains, zero-emission powertrains like fuel cell electric vehicles, so hydrogen-powered vehicles, we observed a decreasing trend in Europe. So from 22, almost 1,400 fuel cell electric cars were registered, but in 25 we counted 393 fuel cell electric cars registered in the European member states. But we expect a rebound actually in this year due to changes in specific models like the Toyota Mirai 2. But overall, the trend for fuel cell electric cars is decreasing since the last 4 years experience. In terms of buses, we see as alternative powertrain battery electric buses becoming dominant. And they also have quite high market share of 22.4% in the overall market. But in the city bus market segment, which is very important for urbanizing our cities, it is already above 50% in Europe. We also expand this segmentation in the EAFO portal soon. In the terms of other powertrains, natural gas bus vehicles are also still dominant in Europe. They counted 2,500 sales in 25, but there is an overall surge of electric buses in Europe since the year 2020. In terms of the bus fleet, we count 31,500 battery electric buses being on the European roads, which counts to 4.3% of the overall total bus fleet. So we also see a growing trend in this vehicle segment. But of course, there is an uneven distribution between the coaches, so the long distance buses, and the city buses. In terms of origins, we see European-made and European origin buses are the most dominant in the market, reached 53% in 25. But we also see, for instance, Chinese-made battery electric buses also exhibited a growth of 6% between 24 and 25. And going to the last vehicle segment, so the trucks, the N2 and the N3 category, we at the moment see 12,000 heavy-duty battery electric truck registrations in 25, reaching 4% market share. We also see here a rapidly growing market in general, dominated by battery electric powertrain. Looking at other powertrains, the natural gas alternative fueled heavy-duty trucks are also still dominant. 7,600 units sold in 25. What we see, on the other hand, is there's a decreasing trend for this type of fueled vehicles since 23. In terms of the fleet, we count 26,000 battery electric trucks being on the roads in Europe, which at the moment still marginal, so that is only 0.26% of the whole truck fleet of the European countries. And in terms of the member states, we see registration surged in Germany, reaching almost 5,000 units. And looking at the market share, the Netherlands was the top one country in Europe, reaching more than 18% battery electric truck market share, but also there are 4 other countries above 12%, including Sweden, Denmark, and also Greece. And a very quick outlook globally. So we see Europe is not alone, of course, and the transition to battery electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles also exhibited growth in 25. And I would like to just close my part of the presentation with an interesting insight that growth or dynamics in growth shifted to rest of the world countries, including regions as Latin America, and countries as Colombia and Brazil exhibited quite a surge of electric vehicles, which of course is very important also for European industry and the European market to be competitive in those regions, which are also now base markets for a couple of European OEMs. And there I close my part of the presentation, and I give the word back to Harm.
Mate, thank you very much. Very insightful. And to all the attendees now, Mate has flooded us with lots of information. It was in turbo speed. That's also the idea. There is a lot of data on the EAFO. Try it. If you didn't do yet, go to the portal. Play with the dynamics. It's interactive. You can make your own overviews in the slides. You can select, you can deselect, you can compare countries. The only way to get the data that you want is by starting to play with it. You will see it's not always easy from the beginning, but because you can make quite complex analysis, it's good to start testing and working with it. Daniela, how are we doing with questions? Are there questions coming in from the audience?
There are, yes, indeed.
So please keep on posting questions. Sjors, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, Harm. And hello, good afternoon, everybody. Great to have you here today. So yeah, my name is Sjors. I'm commercially responsible at Eco-Movement, and yeah, we can jump to the next slide. Basically, at Eco-Movement, what we do is completely specialize in EV charging station data. So we provide EV charging station data as a service to businesses and institutions, and we get this EV charging station data primarily directly from charge point operators. So we have direct API connections with thousands of charge point operators in Europe and also the rest of the world. And then we have a lot of additional data sources to validate and enrich what the charge point operators are sending us. And yeah, that altogether gives one completely aggregated, normalized, quality checked, enriched data set that we provide, and that's of course an important source for EAFO for the charging infrastructure. So diving into the charging infrastructure and what we see happening there. So first, yeah, zooming out, how is Europe doing in a global perspective? So of course, China is still well ahead in number of charging points overall. But if you then look on the right-hand side on the chargers per vehicle, actually the gap is closing, and Europe is almost having as many chargers per vehicle as China, whilst actually in the US the red bars see vehicles have to share chargers, public chargers, with more and more other vehicles. So yeah, I think that's interesting to see. When we look at the growth, so this is looking back over the last years, you can see there has been a very nice compound annual growth rate. And actually for DC, it's actually still growing very, very fast, 40% last year. And the DC share jumped from just 5% some years ago to now 18% of the infrastructure. And also the milestone of 1 million chargers in Europe has been surpassed. We're already over 1.3 million as of today. So I think that's great growth figures. Looking into specific countries, Netherlands is still the biggest in terms of chargers overall, but that's probably short-lived. I think Germany will surpass it soon. Yeah, together with France, these three countries make up half of the European charging infrastructure. But you also see some very fast growth in other countries. For example, last year in Belgium and Denmark is a lot of stations added. I think, yeah, looking at how are the stations versus the AFIR target. So that's really looking at installed capacity. So there are stations with a very fast nominal power, of course, are counted heavier per BEV, so per battery electric vehicle. And you see that all member states, with the exception of Malta, are ahead of the target. So that's really good. And the average is more than 3 times the target. And yeah, you see a lot of variation here as well. So that's driven by different things. Of course, the charging infrastructure installed, but also the vehicles that we talked about already, and yeah, and the power level of individual chargers. So next slide will give some insights about that. You can see huge differences in the mix of power levels of the public charging stations. So all the way on the right is the Netherlands with 97% AC chargers. So a lot of on-street chargers, also driven by the fact most people don't have a driveway where they can place a charger. But all the way on the other hand, you have Latvia with almost 60% of chargers being DC chargers. It's also a small country, but it still has a very high share of DC chargers. And interesting, for example, Norway with the highest percentage of really high power chargers, 35% being high power, 150 kilowatts and up. Yeah, I think we can jump. So looking into prices, so what does it cost to charge at a charging station? We're looking here at ad hoc prices. So if you pay directly to the CPO and not via a subscription, and comparing the per kilowatt hour prices excluding VAT, and you see an average of 42 euro cents per kilowatt hour for the EU 27, but yeah, a very meaningful variation between the countries. I think it's driven by, of course, things like energy and utility costs, regulations like subsidies and levies, but also competition between CPOs in these different markets. The share of fast charging, of course, also plays into it. In the UK, it's a relatively high price. There's also relatively a lot of fast charging happening, for example. So things like this, we can see a bit more on the next slide, where we compare a bit more even apples to apples, looking at fast charging prices, and you can still see a lot of variation with Finland as an example of a country where it's relatively affordable to do fast charging, and Italy on the upper end together with Germany. Yeah, I think can jump. So we also have data specifically on whether charging stations are suitable for heavy duty vehicles. So this is of course really a fast growing segment, and charge point operators are also seeing this. So there's of course charge point operators that really focus on this with sites especially for heavy duty vehicles. There's also a lot of existing sites that are suitable for these types of vehicles. So we work with these CPOs to receive this information, often in custom formats, because the OCPI industry standard, the newest version, supports it, but hardly any CPO is already supporting that. So we get it in custom formats, and we do a lot of feedback on this data through our clients. So we work with a lot of the big truck manufacturers and very nice fleet solutions and apps who from on the ground send us feedback that they've been successfully charging at different charging stations. So this is how we collect this data and provide it to the different players in the market. And jumping to the next slide, aware of the time. So we see that Sweden and France have most of the really heavy duty exclusive stations. But for example, in the Netherlands, there's a lot of mixed use stations. And yeah, that's interesting. We see also on the next slide that in the leading market shares of charge point operators, there's players like Mylands who really have, of course, a complete focus on exclusive stations for heavy duty vehicles, but also players like Fastnet or Ionity who have mixed use. And yeah, they find it interesting to attract these trucks with big batteries charging a lot of kilowatt hours, but of course also bringing challenges in making sure it remains an attractive place to charge for passenger vehicles. So yeah, a very fast growing segment. You can see on the left side, even month by month, many stations being added. So yeah, great space to watch. And I think ending this very quick race through the slides and handing back over.
Thank you, Sjors. Very insightful. Also here, the invitation to all go to the observatory, play with the data. Yeah, Roland, I would like to ask you to lead us through the onshore power supply developments. New area, it's not the only new area, so more and more expansions on the original passenger car focus, and first part of the history of EAFO. Later on, trucks, heavy duty buses were added. More and more shipping is added, rail is added, and this is one of the fast-moving domains. So, Roland, go ahead.
Appreciate. Thank you very much, Harm. So we'll switch immediately to the next page. Of course, thanks to FEAR and EAFO for letting us work on this. EOPSA is the European Onshore Power Supply Association. We regroup those who basically help speed up implementation of shore power. Two things I wanted to share with the audience. First of all, a quick reminder of what we're looking at in terms of AFIR. We're looking at ships that are bigger than 5,000 gross tons. Container vessels, passenger vessels, that's ferries and cruise. So that's what we're looking at, the data that we're going to share in a second. But I did want to share actually 5 points of trends. First of all, DG Move has just produced, or the Commissioner has just produced, a port strategy in which OPS is well referenced. There is actually a good reference to making sure we bundle equipment, we come up with innovation. And then there's 4 other trends that we need to follow if we talk about onshore power supply. First of all, is that DG Energy has come up with a grids package, which is very positive. It highlights the investment into the grid. It highlights the investment where it can't be done on the main grid into what we call energy hubs or microgrids. It highlights the investment necessary into hubs that are financeable. So all in all, for OPS and ports, this is very positive. Then we see a second trend, and you've seen this in cars, but we see it in vessels as well, the maritime battery growth. The maritime battery growth is a 15% CAGR, so annual growth rate. Lots of these operators with smaller vessels like tugs or crew transfer vessels are installing batteries because it's a positive business case, but this will require charging capability in ports, and this will be medium voltage, low voltage. Be like trucks, it'd be like a traditional low voltage capability, but it's a new trend and we need to follow that closely. What we're seeing now in many elections across Europe is that the pollution in port is a social topic. People talk about it. This is important for mayors, for city mayors, and clearly we need to pay attention to how we work from the authorities to the port and help the port deliver, or the various terminals delivers. And then the last trend, of course, we all follow the importance of being resilient and having a capability of operating ports when there are dramas or challenges, cybersecurity, wars, etc., etc. So those are the 4 trends that we need to follow. Can I go to the next page? So what have we found out so far? We've been working with a series of partners, ESPO, thank you very much, and CINEA, of course, sent us data. FEAR, we received some information, and we took, of course, the information from EAFO, but then we went back out to the market, went back out to all the ports. We wrote to a large segment of ports. We got some contacts from all our partners that are listed here. And what we had is 53 ports replied, 62 ports we're still waiting for their reply. We're still hoping that they will give us information. Remember, we're talking about the larger vessels. The data we're collecting is about the larger vessels. So we say that in all the European ports, those who welcome this type of vessels, it's roughly about 190 ports across Europe. So it's not all the 10T ports that will be responding, because not all of them are having cruise or container or ferries in their port. They're doing maybe other type of vessels and smaller vessels and so on and so forth. So we are waiting still to qualify the data for about 100 ports across Europe. What we're seeing now is that today with validated, and I'll show you that in the next slide, validated. So what we're doing is we're going to the network, we're going to our members, we're going to specialists, and we're validating. That way we can enrich the data and bring it back to our friends from EAFO. 21 ports are today in operation, so operational OPS, so ready to be used by the various operators, maritime operators. 7 of those are for cruise, 11 for passengers, and 3 for containers. So we're still seeing the need for it to speed up, but I'll show you in the next slide where we stand in terms of validation, and then the ports that already have in operation. So you've got more ports that have OPS in operation, but we're working with them for validation. So making sure where the OPS system is, what is it that qualifies? Is it interoperable, or is it just limited to one ship owner, and so on and so forth? And then you've got a full segment of ports that are working on it. I want to highlight one port that I spoke to very recently, the port of Calais, that is not listed here, but clearly working on this. So making sure that these ports will be ready for 2030, i.e. AFIR's prescription. So basically, we're seeing progress. The largest issues are being addressed, like the grid capacity, and I think what you're seeing as well in the grids package and in the port strategy is the ability for the port authorities to work with specialist developers, energy developers, and the ability to bundle equipment so that effectively you sell electricity not just to the larger ship, but as well to the batteries, to other ships, to smaller ships, and so on and so forth. And this is a call from our association, is effectively that we need to help electrify ports broader, because this will create an electricity market and therefore make a positive business case. I think that's it for me. I've tried to be as fast, but it's a complex topic. We have a catchphrase, so let's get connected. So thanks, Harm.
Thank you, Roland, for this very clear introduction. Yeah, once again, for the ones who joined later, we really want to thank the European Commission, DG Move, for making this all possible. This observatory, and so Zlatko, you representing DG Move, and thanks once again. Quickly to the Q&A. Daniela, I think you will take over from here.
Sure, thank you, Harm. So thank you to everyone who has been busily populating the Q&A. I guess I will go over to Mate for our first questions. We have a question on where we get our data from. And then there's a few other more data-specific questions on how we calculate the EV fleet if we take into consideration exports, imports, and removals.
Yeah, thank you. So let me start with the sources. So the EAFO, we follow a sort of a validation process for long years. So we aim for source all the data from national public authorities, so road authorities or different ministerial agencies, the data. So our primary aim is to source it from governmental sources, and that we do in the European countries. And if we see, of course, different sources available in the market, so we do benchmarking and we cross-check our data regularly with other publications. But in general, we also have a process together with Eurostat, which also is carrying out a separate process together with the national statistical offices. So we do triangulation of the data, and we make a common process, and therefore we aim for the most accurate and governmental related source. So that is our aim for each member state, to source the data from public authorities, basically, either from governmental or statistical offices, for instance. Of course, in some developing fields with new innovative powertrains, that's not possible. So therefore, we also source more commercial market-oriented sources. And there was also a question on the fleet. So considering the import and export, so indeed, fleet is quite dynamic, and the fleet data is indeed not that easy to determine, like vehicle registrations. So with the fleet, quite some member states has a very high, accurate, up-to-date fleet data, even some member states on a daily basis. So we also do the same process with the fleet where possible. Some member states only publish fleet information in a quite delayed status, so even maybe half a year later, or 3/4 of a year later. So there we use estimates based on historical patterns and registration patterns to estimate it. So also some of the data we use for some member states in this webinar was based on our EAFO estimates. We also have a mandatory parallel process with colleagues at Eurostat. So when they carry out their own survey with the statistical offices in each member state, then we cross-check and validate the data, and also aim for increasing accuracy both for Eurostat and EAFO when we create a more consolidated data set after these cross-checking exercises are done. So we, of course, make sure that any time, for instance, a member state carry out the cleaning process. So, for instance, we saw in Poland there were a cleaning process of the fleet that we also implemented in our own schedules.
Okay.
With this question.
Thank you, Mate. And then also there was a question on if we make predictions of EV sales till 2045, given the review of the publication of the automobile package by the EC in December.
I think, if I can start to answer this, so projections and estimations are in general not in the scope of the observatory. So as the name determines, the observatory observes, so it's not our duty to make predictions, but I am sure the Commission is also working together with other research bodies, and maybe Zlatko, you can comment if you have any estimates on this, but data, EAFO is providing data for these exercises, but not doing projections itself.
I think, Mate, if I may, to add to this one, and also so both us, the other partners, E-Mobility Europe, use the data also pretty much for building projections, because there's a lot in the data that can be used for. There's no projection in it, so that's what Mate already answered. But by studying the patterns, by looking at the purchase price differences, TCOs, it's quite well possible to use it partly for projections. But that's for the users themselves to use the data for. It's not in scope of the observatory.
From our side, I can say also that the projections and the evolution of the vehicle fleet, for instance, you can see it in the impact assessments from the automotive package now in December. These are the very latest. So DG Klima has published the revision of CO2 standards, and then you will see the vehicle uptake. And we in our unit, we have worked on the clean corporate vehicles impact assessment as well. And these are both interlinked, so they're not they're working on the same data. One is more on corporate vehicles, the CO2 standards, obviously the whole market.
Okay, thank you. For the next set of questions, we have some questions on if we've done a comparison on EV charging prices for EVs and electricity mix in respective countries. This is probably more for Shkurs from Eco Movement, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So we have done comparisons that were on the slide, and as Eco Movement, we collect the data very granularly. So it's really on an individual connector level that we collect the tariffs, both the CPO direct prices as well as different MSP prices. So it allows for very detailed comparisons. On Eco Movement side, we haven't done comparisons to link it to the energy mix. We do receive from CPOs sometimes the confirmation that they use fully renewable energy. But yeah, we don't verify this on our end, but we do have that also in our data. So yeah, it gives opportunities, but we haven't done this particular analysis on our end, if I understand the question correctly.
Okay, thank you, Shkurs. And then there was also a question regarding what specific criteria defining HDB suitability. Then the comment that it would be good if this could be made transparent in the EAFO.
Yeah, I can comment to how we look at HDV suitability. So I think it needs to be on the one hand permitted to go there with a heavy duty vehicle. So of course that's something that the charge point operator is in charge of, and something that we verify with them. And on the other hand, it must be possible. So that has to do, of course, with with dimensions of both the parking spot, but also being able to get to that parking spot where you charge. It also has to do with weight. Sometimes there are restrictions on dangerous goods and things like that. So that's all things that we take into account. And so again, the primary source are the charge point operators for this. But we also receive feedback from heavy duty vehicle drivers of different applications and truck manufacturers. They give us feedback where they have been indeed successfully charging, including these relevant details that I'm mentioning, such as dimensions. On including this transparently in the EAFO, but there's maybe somebody else who can comment better on that.
Maybe so we are running out of time now. So maybe a last question, Danielle, and that we then close. There are lots of questions we saw, also the very interesting one about industry policy internationalization. I'm quite sure that we will find a way to also answer those and I provide you some in the download link where you can find the presentation and the recording afterwards. So Danielle.
Sure. For the last question, I think there was a question posed about the rising gas prices and how it will impact electricity prices and charging costs. If there's any comments from our panel on this specifically. I think it's overall on the geopolitical commentary, petrol, fossil fuels. Thank you.
Maybe I can answer. So what we see, of course, is energy cost is a very important component in the economics of electric vehicles compared to fossil fuel vehicles. So this current trend about surging petrol prices, for instance, can give advantage to electric cars, but of course the whole market is more complex, and then we will need to basically see how is the electricity price compared to petrol price, so how the difference is changing anytime we see these trends, because of course electricity is also can be affected by this type of geopolitical events. So what we also follow in EAFO is we follow generally the total cost of ownership of the vehicles, and of that electricity and petrol, so and the prices affecting them is one important component, let's say. So yeah, it can give an advantage, but in general we need to see how the differences changes, and the electricity prices or charging prices are also very complex, and we showed the averages, of course, but yeah, as yours also mentioned, the market is very specific to CPOs and to different service operators. But in general, this can give an advantage in the future.
With this last question and answer, I would like to close the session. It's also a nice closing question, because of course it's terrible what's happening in the Middle East, but what other reasons do we need to go to renewables and to go to electric? I think what's happening there the last weeks gives us the best reasons to transition as soon as possible to renewables on the grid and to electric and zero emission mobility. Thank you very much all for your questions. Yes, there are multiple questions about can we download the presentation? Can we download the link? We will make that available. Do we share it by email? How do to the ones who subscribe? Mate, what's foreseen the link, or do we put the link publicly online to the LinkedIn invitation?
Yes,
What's the idea?
We will publish on the EAFO website and the YouTube channel of EAFO.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. Thank you very much to the attendees, all the audience, and yeah, see you next time for more in-depth explanations about the EAFO.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.